What was the scariest moment you've had on vacation? Story 1. Went vacationing in Mexico with my family when I was 9. Lost my parents in a marketplace in Cancun and tried to tell a guy I was trying to find my family. He told me he'd find me a new one, moments before my father arrived. Story 2. Not me, but in high school my friend was on vacation with his family in Costa Rica. He went out surfing pretty far before he noticed someone even farther out waving to him for help. As he got closer, he realized the guy had kids with him. The man asked my friend to bring his kids to shore and then come back to help him. My friend got the kids in safely, but by the time he got back to the man, he had drowned from exhaustion. My friend had to paddle this guy's body back to shore where his family was waiting. My friend was never really the same. Story 3. Almost died last year. Halfway through vacation, I started having pain in my colon after taking my morning dump. Thought it was just something I ate. Several bloody poops and pain like I've never had before later. And I'm in the ER at 12:30 a.m. being told they thought I was septic and I had a 104.5 degrees fever. After taking pain meds stronger than morphine, apparently I passed out for like 30 minutes and they thought I was going to have a seizure and die, according to several doctors. Turns out I had several infections from unchecked leukemia. Weird thing is, we were vacationing in Outer Banks, NC when I got my cancer diagnosis. Back when I was a kid, my dad was diagnosed with cancer after vacationing there. Safe to say, my family is avoiding it like the plague from now on. Story 4. On an overnight bus from Delhi to Dharamsala. I am female and was 26 at the time. We stopped at a gas station in the night so we could use a restroom. I was the last in line, and when I came out, the bus was taking off and headed back onto the highway. I sprinted after it, screaming, "No!" over and over at the top of my lungs. Someone must have heard or seen me, and the bus stopped. I truly do not know what I would have done had I really been left behind. Story 5, I shared this on here recently because it happened recently. Was snorkeling with my wife and son. My wife was actually free swimming, so she went ahead of us, while my son and I took our time gently paddling over to the main snorkeling area. So she was probably about 50 yards away. Everyone else in the area was probably about 30 yards away. So I'm swimming, and suddenly I feel something start pushing me down into the water. I recover and realize my son, who is 17 and bigger than I am, is holding on to me. He took water into his snorkel and started panicking, so he grabbed onto me. Well, I'm trying to tread water and hold up another full-grown man and figure out how I'm supposed to get somewhere safe where we can stand or get to shore, and I can't manage 2 people. I start dipping in and out of the water because my arms and legs start getting tired and I'm treading for my son's life. If I'm not trying to hold him up, I can just dead man's float until I can catch my breath. Finally, I get the other snorkelers' attention and call for help, and a group of them come over. Someone with a paddleboard gets my son, and then I float and paddle as much as I can, while a dude who's there pulls me toward a boat. By the time I got on the little boat, I just about passed out from exhaustion. I legit thought both my son and I were goners. The crazy thing is, we're both good swimmers. If he wasn't panicking, he could have just swam to shore, which wasn't that far away, or just blew the water from his snorkel and continued swimming. And since he was pulling me down, I'm now panicking and not thinking straight to tell him what to do. One of the scariest experiences of my life. Story 6. I got food poisoning while in Japan. I was with a tour group in a bus with no bathroom when the diarrhea struck. I had to wait until we arrived at our stop, which was 5 agonizing minutes away. When we finally got out, I had to scramble to find a store that A, had a bathroom, and B, wasn't busy to avoid the embarrassment of crapping my brains out. And it's not like anyone spoke English, so that made it harder. It took 10 minutes of me searching, all while holding in the impending diarrhea, before I finally found one. 10 minutes is an eternity when you're holding in liquid poop. I was drenched in sweat from the effort of holding it in and the fear that I might shit myself in public, in a foreign country. Edit. There's actually more to this story afterward, but I think this is enough for others to get the picture. Story 7. I got really drunk in New Orleans. Phone died and I couldn't get an Uber. Decided to walk back to my hotel. Could see it from where I was, so just started walking. 2 women saw me walking and asked if I needed a ride. I said sure. Told them where I was going and jumped in the back seat. Obviously, idiotic drunk move. They drove me, and I could tell we weren't heading to my hotel. They were acting very strange, making phone calls, stopped at a gas station to get some gas. I was sobering up real quick as this was all going down. At the gas station, they said the station wouldn't take cash and were just stalling. I managed to get $20 out of my pocket, put it on the center console, and luckily got out of the car, ran inside the gas station, and waited there for 15 minutes. After a while, I took off running toward my hotel and made it there safely. I only ever told one person about this, and I wonder all the time what they had planned for me. Story 8. I have an interesting story from the 80s when I was a young child. Each summer, my parents took us to Wildwood, New Jersey, and we always had a blast. These memories have stayed with me. One summer, we stayed at our usual reputable beachfront hotel, where we had stayed in previous years. Our room had a living room, kitchen, bathroom, and a hallway leading to the bedroom. I was probably 7 at the time, and I remember this well because it scared us. On the first morning, we found our front door slightly open, even though we always locked it, deadbolted it, and secured the chain. My parents thought one of us might have been sleepwalking. The next night, my father slept in one bed with me, and my mother slept in the other bed with my sister. They slept on the outer sides of the beds to make sure they'd wake up if we got up. Yet the door was open again the next morning. My father went to the main office to discuss the issue with the manager. The manager apologized and said there were no other rooms available. He gave my dad a lighter bill for the week and had someone check the locks, which were found to be in working order. That night, my parents placed all the luggage against the door. The next morning, the door was open, and the luggage was thrown into the living room, with one item on the table. The following night, they put the kitchen table against the door. The next morning, the table was back in its place, even though it was heavy. My parents laughed it off, but later told us they had no idea what was happening. No money was taken, and nothing was disturbed while we were at the pool or beach. Was it my dad sleepwalking? He had never done that before. Was someone getting into the room somehow? Was it a ghost? I don't really believe in that, but whatever it was, we could never explain it. Edit. Lots of people are curious about some stuff, but it's been a while. So I can't remember all the little details, or as to why my dad or mom didn't stay up or just leave. I'm planning to visit my parents this Sunday and ask them about what they did. I'm not sure if my dad stayed up one night. I'll ask him the important questions posed and then update here. Story 9. I was on the back of a moped on the island of Koh Phangan in Thailand, heading down a steep mountain to the town of Had Rin. My buddy was driving and just pushing the gas. All of a sudden, we watched as the ground disappeared from under us, and it was a few 100-foot drop into cliffs and water. It felt like an eternity floating through the air. We suddenly landed back on the road and my buddy skidded to a halt. We both got off and stood looking back in disbelief for a few minutes. That was one of a handful of occasions I almost should have died in Thailand. My grandmother told my mother I would come back in a pine box. She was almost right, LOL. She cut me out of her will because I went on that trip. It's fine, though. If that was reason enough to omit me from said will, then I guess she never really liked me anyway. My pop was a G, though. Sadly, he passed before all this. She bought everyone else's love, though. Sad when I really think about someone having that kind of unhappiness. Story 10. Me and my mom were driving cross-country 3K miles. We stopped off at a motel that backed up into a forest and got a room. Now I'm a compulsive people-pleaser. I don't like to make a fuss, but I only got a few feet into the door before turning around and telling my mom we needed to go somewhere else. What did I see, you ask? Spiders. Everywhere. It was like a scene from a fucking horror movie, and they weren't the good kind of spiders either. Black widows. The room was clean, so I assumed that it had simply been left for a while. Story 11. In 1995, I was in Europe for the summer. The last week was for travel, and I was by myself, a 21-year-old female. As a broke college student, I took advantage of as many freebies as possible, and with my Eurorail pass, I got a free cruise on Lake Geneva. It ended up being much longer than I thought it would be, and it was a really hot day. Because of this, I switched from being on the sunny deck to going inside several times. After I had made the switch a few times, I noticed that a couple was mirroring my movements, but they weren't sitting together. I thought I was being paranoid, so I started moving even more frequently, but the couple followed my every move. Assuming they just wanted to take advantage of a young girl alone, maybe to get my passport or plane ticket, I decided that I would just let them disembark first. At the end, we were the only 3 people on the boat. At this point, I was actually starting to get scared. It was a Sunday, and all my parents knew was that they needed to pick me up at the airport on Friday. If something happened to me, there was no way to track my movements, and there would be a delay of nearly a week. Finally, I noticed that there was a police officer near the end of the ramp. I got off the boat and stood by him. The couple actually hung around for a bit, but finally must have figured out that I wasn't going anywhere by myself. I still had about 6 hours until my train was going to leave, and had planned to do a bit of sightseeing in the town we were in, but decided to play it safe and just stay in the train station where there were other people around. I have no clue what they wanted, but I still have no doubt that they were up to something. Story 12. Our honeymoon, flying into Toronto Airport, coming into land to make a connecting flight overseas. We hear grinding under the plane. This repeats a couple of times, and then the pilot, calm as can be, clicks on the intercom and says, "We seem to be having a little trouble with the landing gear. Everyone, please take your seats and buckle your seatbelts. We're going to delay our approach. Please bear with us." One of the stewardesses rushes towards the cockpit. The seatbelt light goes on, and I look at my husband, who hates to fly. He just gives me a look of pure dread and terror, not saying a word, and I know that this trip was my idea, and this is all my fault. More grinding and the plane tilts as we start to circle. The pilot gets back on the intercom and says, "All flight attendants to their seats, please." More grinding. Then the pilot again, "Everyone, we have the landing gear down and engaged. We will be landing shortly. Thank you for your patience." The whole plane cheered when we landed. Story 13. Not for me, but my dad. Years ago, when I was still a toddler, we were at the beach and I wanted to go into the water so badly, but I wasn't allowed. However, my dad thought that I should learn a lesson, so he let me go in. I sprint into the water and immediately get bodied by a rogue wave. My dad freaked out and ran in to try and find me, but I wasn't anywhere to be seen until he looks down through the foam and sees my face, eyes wide open, grinning ear to ear, submerged under the water as I get dragged back out to sea. I guess we both learned a lesson that day. I learned not to underestimate Mother Nature, and he learned that I'm clinically insane. Story 14. My first year abroad in China, 2002. I'm in the Northeast in the dead of winter, not too far from Siberia. I didn't speak a word of Mandarin then. Myself and some other foreign kids decided to take a 3-hour night train to a nearby city to check it out one weekend. The trains at that time were like cattle cars, people packed in wall to wall, lots of loud yelling. There was no sign that indicated when you reached your stop. Instead, a train employee would come into the car and scream the name of the next stop over the noise. Well, none of us heard it when the name of our stop was called. We only realized we might have missed our destination when we realized we'd been on the train for an hour longer than the trip was supposed to take. We approached the train staff member and tried to explain ourselves with hand gestures, repeating the name of the place we were going over and over. He points back the way we came, indicating we were indeed supposed to get off the train earlier. Then he gestures at us to wait, and when we reach the next stop, he calls over some other guy, we have no idea who this guy is, and motions for us to go with him. The guy leads us off the train, and we emerge into an empty, silent, snowy train yard. The guy starts walking up and down the trains, we presume trying to find the one that is going back the way we came. All of a sudden, the door of a building near the train station bursts open, and 2 military-uniformed guards bolt out, run over to us screaming and hit our guy in the mouth. He's cowering and apologizing and talking a mile a minute. It dawns on us that absolutely no one has any idea where we are. We don't even know where we are. There are no cell phones. If we disappeared or something happened out there, no one would ever find us. Our parents and our school would look for us in the city we were supposed to be in, not way out in the middle of nowhere. The guards take us into a full-on interrogation room. One bare light bulb hangs on a string from the ceiling. Cement walls, barred windows, metal desk. They start yelling at us. We don't know what they're saying. They start yelling at this guy. He's obviously scared and trying to explain something. We think we're about to get tossed in a gulag, never to be heard from again. Because maybe they think we're spies? Turns out they just thought we were sneaking around in the train yard because we were trying to dodge paying the return train fare of 8 RMB, which is around $1 US. All that over $1. We paid very fast and they were immediately cool. They put us back on the right train, all smiles. Story 15. This was probably 2006, maybe 2007. So I was like 15 or 16. I went out surfing by myself in a swell along the Jersey Shore early in the morning right before a hurricane was about to hit. I was riding a retro single fin from the 70 ES, and it was choppy as fuck in the water. I really shouldn't have been out there, especially since there was no one else out there. I dropped in and hit some chop. My board doesn't have much of a nose, so it went right into the water. It caused me to be upended, and I got hit at the base of my skull with the fin. I thankfully didn't get knocked out and resurfaced, and started to paddle back in, but couldn't control the board because the fin broke off on the back of my head. It took me a bit to get back in. I am thankful I was a swimmer and had the stamina to make it back to shore because it was one of the most difficult situations I'd been in the water. That could have ended very badly. I definitely got lucky. Story 16 TLDR, my 6-year-old nephew disappeared for 30 seconds at an interstate rest area. Stopped at an interstate rest area. Myself and my 6-year-old nephew went in the men's room. Long story short, he finished before me and ran out of the restroom. I shouted for him to stop as I stopped midstream and chased after him. I got out the door and it took me about 30 seconds to spot him at a bench 10 feet in front of the building, but that may have been the longest and most horrifying 30 seconds of my life. Story 17. Lost my baby brother at Seaside Boardwalk. My family went crazy for about an hour. Finally found him sitting on the bar at outside saloon surrounded by bikers and their chicks. Bowl of popcorn and a tall soda. They were all facing the boardwalk, and walking people go by waiting to see if he recognized anyone looking for him. Story 18, March 12, 2020. Marriott in Bogota by the airport. We're flying back home to the States the next day, and my wife comes down with food poisoning. I'm watching Mayhem at O'Hare on CNN, and the staff is terrified to hand me room service food at the door. Thoughts running through my mind include missed flights and closed borders. We made it on the flight fine. They were just waving everyone through customs at the Atlanta airport, and Colombia shut down international flights like 12 hours after we left, IRC. Story 19. I was 7 and on my first family vacation to Disney World. In the Orlando airport, we were waiting for the tram to take us to the other side of the airport. I'm assuming from our arrival gate to baggage claim, but I'm not sure because I was 7. A tram came and my mom said, "Let's get on this one." So I remember literally hopping on. The doors closed behind me and my family wasn't on the tram. I began sobbing uncontrollably and this woman pulled me close to her family. She held me close on the tram and at the next station until my family arrived on the next tram. I never got her name, but if she reads this by chance, please DM me so I can thank you 30 years later.